This is Can I Get a Retake? Welcome to episode 1 of season 4. Deanna and I sat down with Hélène de Fays and Pello Huesa, two educators from UNC Chapel Hill and co-authors of the Advanced Spanish Language and Culture title Gente, Lengua Y Cultura, Curso Avanzado de Español, published by GRL. Together, they talk about the challenging but deeply rewarding work of curating a textbook that can capture the enormous linguistic and cultural and political diversity within Spanish-speaking communities. They created a text that centers the direct words of Spanish speakers themselves as they share their lived experiences through articles, letters, videos, songs, and even recipes. Hélène has spent her career helping students develop a deeper understanding and appreciation of the Hispanic world, with a particular focus on how language, culture, and history all shape one another. Pello began teaching Basque to adults in Spain's Basque Country during a grassroots movement to restore their ancestral language. It's this experience that shaped how he understands language as identity, as history, as something that can be sustained only through collective effort and persistence. Through their teaching and scholarship, both professors encourage students to move beyond surface-level fluency. In fact, a lot of our conversation centers around the fact that language learning can't be distilled down to a grade. It's about patience and practice and persistence. It's about engaging with culture and history again and again. And it's about understanding that the hard work of learning a language never really ends. Enough from me. Let's hear from them.
I want to kick off with this. You help students develop a deeper understanding and appreciation for the Hispanic world. What does that actually look like in practice, when you're planning a lesson or leading a discussion in class?
I'm glad you asked that question because it is something I think about a lot. And my methodology, I suppose, my technique has always been to try to engage the students with some sort of experience, something interactive with the culture. And that can take a lot of different forms. For example, with art. We, as you know, we have in our book, we have a unit where it's based on art. And we use art as a context. For example, we can look at it when we're talking about preposition as we do in our text, but something as simple as the concept of family, right? It's something that's profoundly cultural. What we think of family in the United States is completely different from what somebody thinks of family I don't know, say in Costa Rica or Chile or Spain, or even if you're thinking about any African nation. So family is a very cultural concept. So how do you do that? How do you get students to understand what a Hispanic family is? So I like to do that through art. And I will find different famous artists, famous painters, for example, from different Spanish-speaking countries who have representations of family. And we will use those just as a starting point. Instead of me telling them, oh, in Hispanic families, it's more than just mom and dad and the cat and the dog and the sister and the brother. It's all of these things. So we look at different pictures, we look at different representations, and then that opens also the door, not just what is a family, how are families, what are families made up of, but also what are some different factors that will affect a family life, the way a family lives, right? So that's just one example, but there's many different things that you can use for with the students to kind of cover whatever material need to cover that day, be it a grammar structure, a vocabulary unit, but then use some sort of cultural experience, something they can relate to, that they can see, that they can touch, they can interact with, to kind of go deeper into the content.
Think of an example where you could really see it click for a student when that light bulb came on.
Well, one of the things we do to understand, for example, the Hispanic culture is what is it exactly? What is it made up of? I love to use music. And one of the things right now that's fantastic is Bad Bunny. He's so popular. Everybody knows who he is. He's going to win a Super Bowl show. So it's a really great way to introduce the idea of music as a cultural phenomenon, as a cultural experience that everybody interacts with. We all listen to some music. We don't listen to the same music, but we listen to music. So it's a really good way to introduce um, for example, the cultural context. What makes Caribbean music so unique? What makes Bad Bunny such a phenomenon? What are the instruments that are coming that he's using in his music? What is the traditions that he's incorporating into his music? And when do these come from? So that opens the door to looking at string instruments, which mostly come from Spain, indirectly from the Arabs, by the way. They're the one that brought string instruments to Spain. And then we're looking at percussions. Most of the percussion instruments actually come from Africa into the Caribbean music. So that's a way to look at Hispanicness, if you will, as more of a global phenomenon, as like a hodgepodge, a mix, a big rainbow of cultures that have come together to create this unique experience. And that also helps you to understand why there's such variety. You have salsa, you have cumbia, you have son, you have, reggaeton, you have mariachi, you have all sorts of different styles of music that are Hispanic, but they each are composed of such a array of different cultural ingredients, if you will, that really makes a student go, ah. So it's his being Hispanic is not one thing, it's a bit of everything and nothing altogether that creates this kind of unique phenomena, if you will.
Yeah, I would say also teaching languages is not teaching language in the abstract. So it connects you to the culture where the language is also an intrinsic part. It's an essential part. So it opens from the skill to a more deeper understanding of the culture, the countries, the ways of living. And so in my case, I try to find overtures from the content of the class, which in lower level language classes is limited. So you cannot do very deep inroads into culture, but yeah, you can connect and you can have students relate to different ways of seeing the world and to operate.
It is such an enormous linguistic and cultural and political diversity in the Spanish speaking communities. So when you're creating a textbook or a lecture, how do you approach that complexity? What makes it into the book, so to speak, and what doesn't, and how do you choose?
Well, it's a very good question because, as you said, it's such a complex phenomena, culture, that you can't just you have to pick, you can't put everything in it. So I think our objective, when specifically when we were writing this text, there's two things we wanted to do. First is to be representative to that huge array of experiences, of all of the different nuances, all of the different manifestations, that we wanted to be able to, obviously we can't cover it all, but we wanted to give like a fairly good representation of that. And also we wanted to be authentic. We didn't want to write the text ourselves. We didn't want it to be text or a document that was written or filtered, if you will, by our perspective as professors. We really wanted it to be original and authentic. That means letting other people speak for themselves. Whether it was a short story written by a young woman Chilean author, whether it's a recipe for gazpacho from a 60-year-old, like, celebrity chef in Spain, or whether it's a popular legend from Mexico. We really wanted the different voices to be heard in this text without our filter. Of course, quote unquote, we have to filter it because we created activity based on it, but the very basis of it is the authenticity, the originality. And truth be told, some of it might not have been what other people had selected if they wanted to create such a text. We had to choose. We just select from different materials, but our idea from the get-go was to show or to try to give an idea of how vast and how complex and how multifaceted language and culture is. So that was our approach.
No, it's a difficult balance to find. It's you try to find some kind of balance, representation, both the different countries or different ethnicities too. You don't want to be showing a canon of authors, but you do want to show some important author, famous author next to very contemporary authors or products that are not as well known or as well considered, but it's just one more example of the cultures of the productions in the Hispanic world. So it's a difficult balance.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
it's kind of like a museum exhibit. I look at this more than a textbook. I look more like a curated course pack. Just like if you prepare a museum exhibit, you cannot include every single painter in your exhibit. You're going to have to choose. You're going to have to make a selection. And I think that was kind of our approach. We wanted to really curate an experience for our students.
And also different kind of text. Also, we were trying also to combine readings with videos and audios and different genres, poetry versus theater versus short stories. So it's many. It becomes complicated to find the right balance. But well, I think we found something close to a right balance.
Since incorporating this publication into your classroom, what have you heard from students after completing the class?
I'm going to say the feedback has generally been very positive. I think for a couple reasons. First, because it's not, as I just said, it's not a traditional textbook. It has a huge variety of material. Pei, you just mentioned there's audios, there's a TED Talk, there's music, there's visuals. We include comic strips, we include a poem, a short story. There's such a variety of materials that the students they're exposed to so much that there's something for everyone. Every student is going to have one lesson that's going to resonate with them. It's going to go, oh wow, this is really cool. So for the material wise, it's been very positive. The feedback has been great. I think they also enjoy how we were able to weave in vocabulary, grammar, more kind of like academic content with other cultural content. My students are always like surprised by how much literature they end up doing without this being a literature class because literature is culture. And so we're looking at it, but rather than focusing it as, oh, this is literature, which kind of scares people, we're looking more from the cultural side, from where's the author coming from? What is he trying to tell us? How is he choosing his word to express these ideas? How does it connect with a bigger picture? And so I for my classes it's been very positive, and the some of the lessons are a little harder and they kind of moan about it. Some of the things are kind of funny, and they really enjoy it. I think they like the variety of perspectives also.
Yeah, the comments I've read in our evaluations about the materials is that they do think that they are relevant to them. It's not something that is, as I said earlier, like the canon. Oh, this is the literature that you need to know from the Spanish tradition, and totally disconnected to their experiences sometimes. So when we did the selection, we did try both to organize thematically our selections, thinking about what would be relevant to our students, even if some are older materials, still placing them inside a specific theme, students can still relate to those writings or those songs from a long time ago, and still they find an echo in their own reality, their own experience. So they did recognize that the materials are interesting. Sometimes they say that it's a lot of work, but we can do nothing about that, or not much about that.
That's how you learn, by doing the work. Yes. I would say, in my experience, most college students that were raised in the United States have been exposed to Spanish language and culture kind of throughout our lives. It's in our music, in our food, in our place names, our shared histories. Do you see students, as they're listening and watching and learning, begin to shift from the thought of Spanish as a foreign language to more as a foundational part of a general North American culture?
Yes and no.
Differently.
Well, yes and no, I agree. On the one hand, so it's a double. I think it's there's a kind of there's a language which is not their language. They don't speak Spanish. So they're learning Spanish. This is an advanced language class. They all have a background in the language, so they're picking up more vocabulary, to learning the nuances of the grammar and all that good stuff. But I think the cultural part is kind of what is most interesting, because I think they do end up understanding the what we call cultural transference. And it's not, you know, like, oh, Cinco de Mayo, we're going to pretend we're celebrating a Mexican festival. That's not the idea. But cultural transference rather is something that originates in another culture, that is transferred or adapted by a second culture, but then it kind of changes and modifies and acquires like new meanings and new signification. The best example, for example, is I love using the example of the taco trucks, right? It's a very Mexican thing. Tacos originated with the Toltecs and whatnot, but it's become part of their culture. Like the food truck phenomenon develops out of the idea of the taco stands in Mexico. But that's become like a huge part of their culture. So I really enjoy kind of talking about the roots, talking about the background, talking about the origins of certain things, and how culture is permeable. Um, uh, um, North America, United States is not monolithic either, just like Hispanic culture is not monolithic. So I really like to talk about cultural transfer. Many things that they do, that they think, that they enjoy, is actually kind of a Hispanic thing. Where they, and sometimes they don't even really realize it or they understand it. But it becomes part of their everyday experience, without really thinking about it as something Hispanic or of Hispanic origin. Um, One of the things I enjoy time at, for example, we've talked about music, talked about salsa, we've talked about the different artists who are doing collaborations, and it becomes a very American thing, but the collaboration is with foreign um, artists, right? With Hispanic artists. But sometimes they're not aware of it, which is kind of fun to point these things out. I love, pointing out that their favorite food, like pizza, would not be possible without Europeans and the Aztecs, because the tomato comes from the Aztecs and wheat was brought to the Americas by the Europeans. So a lot of those things are often like, oh, really? So these are just like little examples, but it is fun to kind of make them understand that they're not this kind of like isolated, monolithic, kind of unique culture, that they are very much a product of these exchanges and these cultural transferences.
What is a question that you wish students would ask you more often? whether it's about language or culture, teaching, or even your own experience?
No, I'm kind of like an open book. I mean, some things obviously I keep private, but I'm very open with my students. I like to, if they have curiosity about my own experience, which is not, your traditional, I guess, you know, journey. My journey to being a professor was not necessarily a traditional one. So I enjoy answering their questions because they're often curious about how or why did you decide to, become a professor. And when they do, I tell them it's purely accidental. It was never in the card or in the life plans. But it's something I enjoy. But questions that I wish they asked, I do sometimes wish they would not be afraid to go deeper. Especially in today's climate, I think, and this is true both for professors and students, there's a certain amount of kind of self-censorship or the concept of like, oh, we shouldn't talk about that. And I'm not going to initiate the conversation because I don't want to make my students comfortable, but sometimes there's this idea of like you're talking about something that, might bring up different points of view, might bring up a solid discussion, but they're very timid and they don't really want to initiate that conversation. And I think that's unfortunate. Things, when we're talking about colonialism or you're talking about the conquest, you're talking specifically like in my culture courses when we're talking about some ancient culture, some of the practices. They kind of want to know more, but they're afraid because they don't want to give the wrong impression. And and so I wish they wouldn't be so afraid to ask the questions.
Yeah, it's a great
Mhm.
point. I totally agree with Hélène. Definitely, self-censorship is it's an issue. It's we are afraid. Students are afraid to say things to make someone uncomfortable. It makes the learning experience much limited for all. In the end, we are losing an opportunity there to grow all as a group and as individuals. So yeah, even though still students in my classes are quite talkative and they don't look afraid or timid or anything like that, but we don't go many times as deep as we could go, or we don't ask the risky questions.
Lon, you mentioned that you had a non-traditional road or journey to where you are now. I'm curious from both of you to learn how you ended up in the seat that you are now.
I so so my first language is French. And then I learned French and Spanish because my mom's Spanish, my dad's Belgian, so I grew up speaking both. But also so Spanish was never really I never studied it. I've always spoken Spanish at home, but never really thought of it as a career. And my undergraduate degrees are actually in political science and finance. Um, and so that was what I was working on. When I graduated from undergraduate degree, I was living in Madrid. I was working in the field, and then I picked up some English classes. Some friends wanted to learn English, and some of their colleagues need to learn English. So I started teaching English. I decided that I like to teach. It was something I really enjoyed. It was a world that's less competitive, less focused on money. I've always been what I like to call like a bit of a nerd. I love reading. I love traveling. I love the arts. I love music. So. It was definitely, the humanities definitely pulled at me for a long time. So I started teaching English when I was in Spain. And then I realized that if I wanted to really be a good teacher, I needed the fundamental, I needed to learn, some pedagogy, learn the trade, if you will. So I decided to come back to the States. My half my family's here, half my family's in Europe. So I came to visit. One of my sister actually lived in Chapel Hill. And I was visiting, and it's like, oh, there's like a university here. So I just decided to apply for graduate school here, and thought I would do this for a little bit. So long story short, I ended up doing a master's here at UNC, a PhD, then I returned to Europe. And then I ended up returning here. Then I got hired, and then I ended up becoming a professor of Spanish literature and language, specialized in Latin American science fiction. So there you go. So yeah. As I said, it's been a very indirect route because it was never anything I planned on doing. It's something I've always really enjoyed doing, and to be able to make it my job, make it my profession has been like a treat. So that's one of the things I tell my students, find something that you love to do because you're going to do it for many years of your life. Might as well enjoy it, right? Um,
Mhm.
so that's kind of been my indirect route to professorship. And I didn't graduate until I was 35 years old, so it took a long time to get there.
Yeah, I am also non-traditional teacher of Spanish. I did learn the trade of teaching languages while I was in Spain. Before college, I started teaching Basque before college. In high school, I was also already teaching adults the Basque language and learning techniques through a movement of I don't know how, a movement of revitalization of the language. So I did start doing that and started loving the profession. On the other hand, trying to become a career sociologist or to work in political science or something like that. And I then moved to France to teach Spanish. An unexpected offer that some friend made to me. I have some friends in France. Would you want to go to France to teach Spanish? What? Teach Spanish? And I started teaching Spanish in college, and then I met my partner, who would became my wife in France, and we moved to the States for her career. And then I finally decided that this was going to be my job. In the end, it became easier on the one hand because I already knew the trade. I love learning and dealing with languages. It's kind of a passion of myself, and so it was not a difficult decision for me to make, and well, that has become a long career.
The vast history of Hispanic world across centuries, they're going to encounter the Inquisition, the colonial period. You mentioned the Columbian Exchange. That came with great things, the exchange of tomatoes with wheat, and then it also came with the exchange of disease and enslavement, for example. What can you do to help students see the connections between these histories and these realities that brought us to the present and how they are affecting the current politics and the current living situation across the Hispanic world?
I was thinking about this the other day. I was talking to my father about it. And one of the things, like, it's hard for the students. It's very hard to talk openly about these things because you don't want to seem like you're justifying or indirectly approving something that is not at all acceptable in history. For example, colonization, conquest, inquisition. I always make a point to tell my students is to put themselves, or to try to put themselves in the context at a time. So, for example, an easy one, a very easy one, is the initial conquest, the initial encounter between Europeans and the Americas. The context is that during 700 years, 700, we're talking a massive amount of time, the the worldview of the Iberians, because you can even talk about the Spaniards yet, but the Iberians, the Christian European Iberians, was that it's us versus the Moors. The Moors were the North African Islamic culture that had crossed the Gibraltar Strait and was occupying Spain. I mean, it's not even occupation. They were there for 700 years. Anyway, so that the territory, they were in the territory. So it set up this kind of us versus them mentality. So during 700 years, up until 1492, a key year, it was the Christians versus the Moor, which is us versus them, the one versus the other, the white versus the colored, all of these dichotomies. So when Columbus makes a tragic navigational mistakes and lands in America, how else would this man would have thought of the people he encountered other than from that dichotomy, which was so profoundly ingrained in his worldview, in his culture during centuries? So his behavior was the only logical behavior. um, it doesn't justify a massacre. It doesn't justify, the conquest and the destruction, but it does explain how can somebody do that? How can somebody participate in this kind of violence? You have to put it in context. Now, it's completely wrong. Yes, because once the Spaniards learn more about the indigenous culture, they realize these are not barbarian people. These are highly advanced, highly developed, highly sophisticated civilizations, and then they should have definitely changed in attitude. But the original contact could not have gone any other way. I mean, Columbus was a product of this long, long history of war. I mean, the Spaniards were warriors that had consistently been told and participated in war against this other, which was these non-Catholic, non-white, non-European people. So when they see another group that kind of looks like they could be more, so how are they going to react? It's emotional. So the idea is not to justify or accept or say, hey, this was okay. The idea is like put yourself in that position. How would you have reacted? What would you have done differently? Because any other reaction would have been completely illogical. I mean, had Columbus landed and embraced the indigenous people encounter, his own men would have killed him because they would have thought he was a complete heretic. So there's a lot of those kinds of situation in history that you have to kind of take a step back, look at them, and understand why people do what they do. And this is true in many different contexts. You have to look at why people behaved a certain way. And then, of course, you learn from that. Then you learn from history. Nobody wants this history to repeat itself. But these kinds of things occur. The same thing, when you're looking at the Inquisition is a brutal and violent period of Spanish history. There's no explaining it. But religion, since the existence of human society, has been a reason for some of the most atrocious acts of violence. The Romans sacrificed numbers of people. They attacked countries and committed all sorts of atrocities, and yet the Romans are glorified as the birth of civilizations. The Aztecs, they committed just tens of thousands of human sacrifice because of their religion, their worldview. Nowadays, look what happens in the Middle East. It's constant. So we have to kind of take a step back and not accept it. No, no way. Violence is never acceptable, not justified, but take a step back to think of why these things are happening, to to not let them happen again, to put a stop to it, to go to the root causes, and to not allow history to repeat itself, because these kind of violent mindsets and these violent actions, they've plagued our history. I mean, since it began, since civilization began. So these are things that are really hard for students to kind of come to terms with. That you've got to see why things happen, understand it, to be able to react logically and to avoid them going forward.
Yeah, I don't teach content classes as Hélène, but I would introduce also the idea of complexity, of going beyond value judgments or dichotomic view of the world, good and bad, good and evil. I mean, it's very complicated, the way things have evolved in history in all civilizations. So we can. I mean, I would not pretend giving the students the right view of history, but I would try to instill in them the curiosity for finding ways to understand why things have happened this way, or how other options were not as logical as
The last question is just, we call it You're Wrong. It's basically a chance to address any kind of misconception that's within your genre, your discipline, that students might have, that other Spanish language learners might have, just to set the record straight in some form.
Well, in that sense, it's like I hate that people think of language just as rules and memorizing vocabulary and, you know, knowing grammar forms. It's I think Pello mentioned it earlier. Language, and Spanish language in particular, it is so much more than that. It's so much more than just knowing how to put two words together. It's communication. It's communication. It's a human thing. You've got to invest and you've got to love it to be able to do it well. And thinking that you're just gonna, you know, because you know how to conjugate a verb and you remember the cases in which you use it, you're going to be good. It doesn't work that way. That's one of the things that annoys me about language learners. They think, well, I know how to conjugate a preterite. I'm just like, yeah, but you don't know how to use it. You know, you've got to learn the human side of the language to be able to actually use the language. That's mine. Pello?
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I was thinking more about the result oriented, our result oriented students, how they get frustrated
Mm.
at not having the best grades, for example, because of, I don't know, because of these stupid rules, or because of how strict these Spanish professors are. And I mean, it makes me a little defensive. In the end, there is effort in all learning. There is effort, and there is a bar that you need to reach. The fact that you need to get a certain GPA, or that you need to reach some kind of academic goal, has nothing to do with your progress in learning the language. It's either you learn or you don't learn. Don't reduce everything to your grades. And unfortunately, I think more and more we have a very tunnel vision. I need to get this grade, and all the rest is secondary. I need to get, and if I don't, the problem is somewhere else.
Your fault.
The problem is not me. Is not how I work. The problem is that these professors or this textbook, or this, that I don't know if it's a misconception, or it's a culture, or it's maybe a generation gap or difference. I don't know, but that I do.
It's too bad, because it takes the love and the enjoyment out of learning the language too.
On the other hand, the good thing about being a Spanish professor is like often our students will say that they love taking Spanish class because it's their fun class. Most of our students are like they're like they're doing business people, they're doing pre-law, they're doing biology, and they have all these really challenging labs and stuff. And they have these classes with 200 other students. In our Spanish classes, they're little groups and they talk and they get to know each other and they form connections, which is what language is about. So a lot of our students did this, even if they're not Spanish majors, they love to take Spanish classes because it's their fun classes where they get to talk and exchange ideas and they get to meet people and explore fun stuff while they're learning, right? So that's the good stuff.
The bright side of it.
Yes, yes, yes. And they laugh at my jokes because they have to.
Thanks for tuning in to Can I Get a Retake, a podcast by Great River Learning. If you liked the episode, show your support by subscribing, sharing, and leaving a review on your favorite podcast platform. For detailed show notes and transcripts, visit greatriverlearning.com. Can I Get a Retake is brought to you by hosts Michelle Manaman and Deanna Plussel. Our show is produced and edited by Michaela Albee and Maggie Christensen. Artwork for the podcast is crafted by Michelle Manaman. Our intro music is courtesy of Comma Media. We'll be back soon with another captivating chat with a top GRL educator.